The wind was dying that evening when I first saw her, a lone woman in a torn wedding dress, swaying like a ghost against the red dust sunset. For a heartbeat, I thought she was some mirage the desert had shaped out of loneliness. But then she fell silent, hard right against my fence line, as if the land itself had given up holding her. Her hands were scraped raw. Her lips whispered one broken sentence. "Please, don't let him take me back." That was all. And somehow, it was enough to change every life under my roof. Because some people don't arrive at your door looking for shelter. They arrive carrying storms you don't yet understand, and a kind of hope you never expected to feel again. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe now. Let's begin. The first thing Cole Ramsey heard was the wind long and low, dragging across the open range like a wounded animal. By the time he looked up, the sky over the New Mexico territory had already turned the color of burnt copper. Red dust rose in thick sheets, rolling across the flats and swallowing fence posts one by one. He tugged his hat lower, squinting against the grit. Another half hour and he'd be home, God willing. Another night of silence, another night pretending the house didn't echo where Lydia used to stand. His horse, Bramble, tossed its head as the wind drove harder. Cole patted its neck, murmuring something steady. He wasn't a man who talked much anymore, hadn't been since the winter fever took Lydia 6 months back and left him with 2 girls who needed more comfort than he knew how to give. He kept food on the table, kept fences mended, kept cattle alive. Feelings could wait. Feelings had waited all spring and summer. They weren't going anywhere. A gust slammed into him, lifting dust in a red veil. Cole coughed, wiped his eyes, and that's when he saw it. No, her, a pale scrap of something clinging to the far fence. At first he thought it was just a feed sack blown from somebody's wagon, but feed sacks didn't sway like a living thing. They didn't reach out a hand, or lose their grip, or fold to the ground like someone's strength had finally given out. Cole pulled Bramble to a stop. The dust thinned just enough for him to make sense of the shape lying half across the fence line. A woman? Lord help him. A woman in white, what used to be white, now caked in dirt and torn into ribbons. Bare feet, cut open by miles of dry brush, hair plastered to her cheeks with sweat and dust. He swung down from the saddle, boots sinking into the powdery soil. The storm hummed against his ears. Up close, she didn't look dead, but she sure as hell looked close. Her breathing was shallow, her face streaked with tracks where tears had cut through the grime. He knelt, sliding an arm beneath her shoulders. Her skin was hot as a branding iron. "Ma'am," he said, voice rough, "can you hear me?" Her lips parted. A whisper scraped out, barely sound at all. "Don't let him send me back." Then her eyes rolled, and she went limp in his arms. Cole froze. He didn't know who him was. Didn't want to. Nothing about this smelled simple. A woman in a torn wedding dress didn't end up at a ranch fence by accident. And men didn't chase brides for any reason that ended well. If he touched this, he was taking on more trouble than he could name. His jaw clenched. Storm clouds pushed low across the range, lighting flaring somewhere beyond the ridge. If he left her, she'd be dead in an hour, maybe less. Coyotes would come down from the hills, or the wind would take the last of her breath. He tried to reason with himself. He had 2 daughters at home. Ruth was old enough to start asking questions. Maddie was still small enough to believe in angels. And he didn't have space for danger. Or strangers. or women with pasts that could bring the wrong sort to his door, but he looked at her feet, blistered, bleeding, looked at the way her hands curled, as if trying to hold on to something that wasn't there anymore, looked at her face too young for this kind of ruin, too worn to have come far by choice. A bolt of lightning split the sky, close enough to shake the ground. Cole swore under his breath. All right, he muttered, shifting her weight. Damn it. He lifted her, surprised at how light she was, like bone and cloth and nothing else. He carried her to Bramble and hauled her up, settling her sideways in the saddle. She sagged against the horn, head falling against his shoulder. This is a mistake. He told the wind. A big one. The wind didn't care. He mounted behind her, one arm braced to keep her steady. Her breath warmed the side of his neck, faint but there. The storm swallowed them both as he clicked his tongue and urged Bramble toward the ranch. The dust whipped harder. The fence posts blurred. Cole leaned into the wind and felt a strange pull in his chest, a feeling he hadn't let himself feel in months. Not hope. Not exactly. More like the barest start of something waking up. Something that remembered Lydia's gentle hands, her soft insistence that every life deserved a chance, even when it made things harder. He shook the thought away. This woman wasn't Lydia. This woman wasn't anybody he knew. She was trouble wrapped in white fabric and silence. And when the storm passed, he'd have to figure out what to do with her. But for tonight she was breathing, and she was in his care. He nudged Bramble forward, voice low, resigned, almost weary. All right then, stranger, tonight you're my problem. The ranch lights were still miles off, flickering through the dust. Cole tightened his grip on the reins and rode into the storm. A man carrying a burden he hadn't chosen yet, couldn't bring himself to leave behind. The night swallowed them whole, and somewhere behind the darkness, the story started to shift. Cole shouldered the door open with his boot, the hinges groaning like an old man waking from a nap. Warmth rolled out from the potbelly stove, carrying the smell of beans simmering low and wood smoke settling into every board of the ramshackle ranch house. Inside, two girls froze, where they stood, one tall and stiff-backed, the other small enough to still hide behind her sister's skirts. Pa, the older one, asked. Who's that? Cole didn't answer right away. He had both arms around the unconscious woman, her head against his chest, her hair still full of red dust. He stepped inside and nudged the door shut with his heel. Ruth, he said finally. Heat some water. The girl nodded once quick, responsible, already too grown at 10. She hurried toward the stove, lifting the cast-iron kettle with both hands. The younger one, Maddie, squeezed her rag doll tight, staring with eyes that looked too big for her face. Cole lowered the woman onto the worn couch, Lydia's old mending quilt folded on top. The woman barely moved, a faint sound leaving her throat when her feet brushed the fabric. The lamplight caught the raw scrapes along her soles, and Cole felt his jaw tense again. Maddie, he said gently, fetch another quilt, the thick one. The little girl darted off, her braids bouncing. Ruth brought the steaming kettle, lips pressed thin, watching everything with a seriousness no child ought to carry. Cole knelt beside the woman and pulled the basin closer. Hold this steady, he muttered. Ruth did. She always did. He dipped a cloth in the hot water. Mud bled off first, then dust, then blood not fresh, but cracked and dried. The kind that came from miles of walking where no decent trail existed. Her ankles were swollen, her toes blistered. When he lifted her right hand to wash the dirt from her wrist, he saw the faint ridge of an old rope burn. Ruth saw it too. Her brows drew tight. Pa. Not now, Cole said quietly. He wasn't sure what answer he'd have, even if he tried. Plenty of things left marks like that. Some accidental, many not. He worked in silence, wiping the cuts, drying her feet with the softest towel he owned, which wasn't saying much. Maddie returned with the quilt, dragging it across the floor. Cole wrapped it around the woman's shoulders, tucking it close. As he straightened, the wind rattled the windows. Maddie inched closer, looking from her father to the stranger. "Is she gonna die?" she whispered. "No," Cole said, though he couldn't be sure. "She's just worn out." He knelt again, brushed a strand of hair from the woman's forehead. "She'll wake." He hoped. Sometime after midnight, a faint rustle woke Eliza Kane. She didn't know her name at first, only that her throat burned, her skin ached, and something soft covered her shoulders. When she tried to sit up, the room swayed. Wood crackled close by. A stove. Two small shapes sat cross-legged on the floor nearby. "She's not dead," one whispered. "I never said she was." The other hissed. But Pa wouldn't bring a stranger home for no reason. "Maybe she's an angel. Angels don't look like that." Eliza blinked, her vision swimming. The girls didn't see her yet. She closed her eyes again. Breath shallow? Not yet. Not now. The dark pulled her back under before she could speak. Morning crept, in slow, gray, with a thin line of winter light slipping across the floorboards. Eliza woke to its touch, disoriented and heavy. Someone had left a cotton dress folded at the foot of the couch, a simple work dress. Faded blue. She gathered it in trembling hands, remembering the torn wedding gown she'd worn, and felt heat rise in her cheeks. She dressed as best she could, wincing as her feet found the floor. When she tried to stand, her knees buckled. She caught the arm of the couch, heart racing. The door swung open. Cole filled the frame, hat in hand, eyes sharp despite too little sleep. "You're awake," he said. "I shouldn't be here," she murmured. "I'll go as soon as I can walk." Cole looked at her feet, then back at her. His voice was flat, firm, leaving no room for argument. "You're not walking anywhere in that state. You eat first." Eliza swallowed hard. "I don't want to trouble your family." "Too late for that," he said, not unkindly. "Sit." She sat. Ruth placed a tin plate in front of her bread. A bit of cold beef, a cup of weak coffee. The girl didn't speak, but her eyes never left Eliza's face. Maddie hovered behind her sister. The rag doll pressed to her cheek. Eliza ate slowly, feeling every gaze on her. Every clatter of fork against tin felt too loud. She thanked the girls softly. Ruth nodded in stiff acknowledgement. Maddie smiled, shy but curious. Cole stepped outside afterward, muttering something about checking the east fence. Eliza watched him go, uncertainty knotting in her stomach. She didn't belong here, but she wasn't strong enough yet to anywhere else. That night, after the girls had washed and climbed into their shared bed, after Cole had banked the fire low, Eliza found the nightgown he'd left for her, a soft, pale garment that smelled faintly of lavender and wood smoke. She lifted it with trembling fingers. It wasn't hers. She knew without asking. It had belonged to his wife. Eliza buttoned it slowly, each click of wood against cloth feeling like an intrusion she couldn't avoid. She moved quietly, not wanting another set of eyes on her. But when she turned, Ruth stood in the doorway, bare feet on wood, thin braids down her shoulders, her face pale in the lamplight. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ruth's voice came small, cracked, trying not to break, Are you here to take Mama's place? Eliza's breath caught. Words failed her. The room felt too tight, too bright, too full of someone else's memories. She reached for something to say, something gentle, something true, but nothing came. And Ruth waited, lips trembling, eyes shining with a fear older than her years. The lamp flickered, the wind pressed against the walls. Eliza stood frozen, shaking, unable to answer. The night held its breath around them. Morning came slow to the Ramsey ranch, slipping across the floorboards in pale bands of gold. Eliza sat at the edge of the table, back straight, fingers knotted in her lap. The borrowed dress hung loose on her shoulders. Across from her, Ruth ate in tiny, precise bites, eyes darting up now and then, like she was checking whether Eliza might suddenly disappear. Maddie swung her legs under the bench, humming something tuneless, watching the stranger with open wonder. Cole poured coffee into a tin cup, the steam rising between them like a thin wall. No one spoke. Even the stove seemed quieter than usual. Biscuit Maddie whispered, pushing a plate toward Eliza. Eliza hesitated, then nodded, murmured thanks. Her voice scratched from too many miles and too little water. Ruth nudged Maddie under the table, but the little one didn't seem to notice. Cole finally sat. His chair creaked. "Eat while it's warm," he said, mostly out of duty. Eliza forced down a bite. The warmth hurt her empty stomach. But it was a good hurt, like remembering what real food tasted like after too long pretending she didn't need any. Ruth whispered something to Maddie behind her hand. Maddie giggled. Eliza felt the heat rise in her cheeks and kept her head down. When the plates emptied and the girls were told to fetch kindling, Cole stepped onto the front porch. He didn't ask Eliza to follow, just gave her a look that said she should. She obeyed, holding the door frame for balance as she stepped outside. The porch boards were rough beneath her bare feet. Cole leaned against the rail, hat tipped back slightly, arms folded. He was a big man, not imposing, exactly, but sturdy in a way that made the house itself seem steadier when he stood in it. "What's your name?" he asked without preamble. "Eliza," she said softly. "Last name," she swallowed. "Kane." He nodded as though storing that away. "Where'd you come from?" She looked out over the yard. The wind toyed with the ends of her hair. "Santa Fe," she said. I walked a long way." Cole didn't push. He simply waited, jaw tight, eyes unreadable. Finally, she forced the words out. "I walked away from a wedding that should never have happened." His expression didn't change, but the silence felt different, less hard, more like a man measuring truth against instinct. "Anyone chasing you, I don't know," she whispered. "But I couldn't stay there." Cole exhaled, slow, practical, always practical. "I see." He pushed off the rail and stood straighter. "Here's what I can offer you. Miss Kane, and it ain't much. A cot in the back room, meals, a roof that leaks only when it rains sideways. In return, you keep this place from falling apart and help with the girls when I'm out with the cattle." Eliza felt her breath catch, not with surprise, just relief so sharp it hurt. Cole went on, voice even. "Strictly work. You're not beholden to me. You're free to leave whenever you can stand on your own feet again." Eliza lowered her gaze. She didn't want charity, but she needed a place to breathe, a place to stop running long enough to remember what running away had cost. "I accept," she said, voice steady enough to surprise her. "Thank you." Cole gave one short nod. Then he called the girls back and told them to show Eliza the wash tub behind the house, the drying line, the wood box by the stove, and that was that. Work came fast and clumsy. Eliza's first attempt at biscuits turned the air in the kitchen into a burnt haze. Maddie coughed and waved her hands, giggling. Ruth tried not to smile and failed. Even Cole paused in the doorway, stared at the blackened lumps on the pan, then turned away with something suspiciously close to amusement, tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I'll learn," Eliza muttered, mortified. "Most folks do," Cole said, passing her a fresh bag of flour before heading out to check the horses. Later, she washed clothes by the wash tub. Sleeves rolled above her elbows, the icy water bit into her raw skin. But she kept at it, scrubbing until her knuckles stung. Ruth watched from the doorway, arms folded, torn between caution and curiosity. "That's too much lie." The girl finally said, "Oh." Eliza blushed. "Thank you." Ruth shrugged, but a small flicker of something not quite trust passed between them. By evening, Eliza sat near the lamp, mending the hem of Ruth's dress. The girl stood still as a fence post, watching each careful stitch. "You don't have to do all that," Ruth said. Eliza smiled faintly. "I know." The lamplight softened Ruth's stern expression. For a heartbeat, she looked like the child she was, not the little mother she had forced herself to become. The house fell quiet after Cole put the girls to bed. Eliza stepped outside to breathe. Her hands ached, her back stiff, but there was something good in the ache, something that said she'd earned her place for the day. She meant to head to the back room and collapse. Instead, she heard a voice, drifting from the barn, low, rough, talking to a horse. Cole. She paused just outside the open barn door. The lantern lit him in warm amber, one hand stroking Bramble's neck. "Can't keep strays forever," he murmured. "Might be trouble. Don't know what her story is yet." His horse huffed softly, nudging his shoulder. "I know," Cole said, almost apologetic, "but the girls are getting attached. And I can't afford chaos, not now." Eliza's chest tightened. She shouldn't have been listening. She stepped back, ready to retreat, but then she heard him sigh a tired, human sound. "Just gotta be careful," he said. "That's all." Eliza closed her eyes. For a moment, the sting cut deep, sharper than she expected. But she forced her shoulders square. She'd lived through worse words, and she'd survived these too. She turned toward the house, whispering to herself, "Tomorrow, I'll work harder, until he decides I've paid my keep." The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of hay and horses, and the night pressed close, as if listening. Weeks passed the way dust settles, quietly, a little at a time, until one morning Cole noticed the whole house no longer felt like a place trying to forget something. Curtains that had hung stiff and gray now fluttered clean in the morning breeze. The table bore the soft shine of fresh scrubbing. Quilts that once smelled of closed-up grief aired in the sunlight until they carried the scent of sage and open sky. Even the air inside shifted less dust. More coffee, more bread, more life. Cole didn't say a word about it, but he noticed. The girls did too. Maddie trailed Eliza like a shadow. If Eliza stirred stew clockwise, Maddie mimicked her with a wooden spoon in an empty pan. If Eliza reached for the wash basin, Maddie stood on tiptoe beside her with a rag of her own. And every morning before chores, Maddie would tug at Eliza's sleeve and ask in a hopeful whisper, "Will you braid my hair today?" Like yesterday, Eliza always said yes. Ruth watched all of it from a distance, chin lifted, arms often crossed, her eyes sharp. She wasn't unkind. She wasn't rude. She was simply holding the world at arm's length. A girl who'd lost too much too soon, and was determined not to lose anything else without giving it a hard fight. Most days fell into a soft routine. Cole rode out early to check fence lines, leaving Eliza and the girls to the hum of chores. Midday brought the clatter of pails, the sound of laundry snapping on the line. Evenings carried the smell of wood smoke and bread, warming on the stove. Little by little, the Ramseys and their stranger began fitting into the same quiet rhythm. But rhythms have a way of breaking. It happened on a windy afternoon, sky the color of tin. Eliza was kneading dough while Maddie hummed to herself, smoothing wrinkles from a quilt spread across the table. Ruth hovered at the stove, too close, too stubborn. She'd insisted earlier she knew how to manage the fire. Eliza had gently suggested she wait, but the girl raised her chin, stoking like she was trying to prove something. When Ruth lifted the iron poker to wedge another thick chunk of wood into the stove, the handle of the lantern on the nearby counter caught her elbow. The small glass lamp tipped, wobbled, and fell, hitting the floor with a sharp crack. Oil spilled in a quick, hungry arc. The flame caught at once. The wall blossomed into fire. Maddie screamed. Ruth froze, eyes widening so fast they shone white. Eliza didn't think she just moved. She grabbed the nearest soaked sack from the water barrel by the door, swung it once, and slammed it against the flames. Heat licked her arm, blistering fast. Smoke burned her throat. She beat at the fire again and again, each hit stronger than the last. The flames sputtered, shrunk, died, when Cole burst through the door, hat half off. Boots pounding, Eliza was still there, breathing hard, one arm red and raw. Maddie clung to her skirts, crying. Ruth stood rigid, face drained completely of color. What in God's name? Cole started, but the sight of the burned wall stopped him cold. Ruth opened her mouth, voice cracking. Pa, it was my fault, Eliza said quickly. Too quickly. I wasn't paying attention. Ruth's head snapped toward her, eyes wide. Eliza met the girl's gaze, briefly soft, steady, offering something Ruth had never been offered: protection without condition. Cole looked from one to the other, confusion mixed with the leftover adrenaline in his eyes, but he didn't press. He simply exhaled, shook his head, and said, "We'll talk later." Then he guided Ruth outside, Maddie trailing behind them, still hiccuping small sobs. Eliza stayed behind and swept up the broken glass with her good hand. Her burned arm trembled each time she lifted it. The pain throbbed deep, but she grit her teeth. She'd endured worse. The house settled back into uneasy quiet. Smoke clung to the rafters. Wind brushed the windows like a tired apology. Later, after the girls had been sent to bed, after the lanterns dimmed, Ruth crept down the hallway, bare feet silent against the floorboards. She didn't mean to listen. She meant only to drink water. But voices drifted from the porch, Cole's voice first, low and rough. Could have lost the whole kitchen, hell, could have lost the whole house. There was a pause. Then softer. She acted fast, saved us a world of trouble, saved the girls. Ruth pressed herself against the wall, breath caught somewhere high in her chest. He added, almost to himself, "I owe her for that." The words landed heavy, shifting something inside the girl. Guilt prickled hot beneath her skin. But so did something else, something she didn't want to name yet. Ruth crept back to bed long after the porch went quiet. In the dark, she lay awake, torn between the weight of what she'd nearly caused and the warmth of what Eliza had done, between fear and gratitude, between anger and hope, between the past she clung to and the woman she wasn't sure she could trust, but wanted to. and outside, the wind carried the quiet promise of change. By the time October winds scraped across the Ramsey land, supplies had dwindled to the bare boards of the pantry. Flour down to the last cup, coffee just dust in the tin, lamp oil low enough that the evening lamps flickered more than they burned. Cole stood with the pantry door open, thumb rubbing at the bridge of his nose. "Looks like Dusty Ford's getting our business today," he muttered. "I'll come with you," Eliza said before she could lose her nerve. Cole turned. "You don't have to." "I know," she answered softly, "but I can't stay, hid out here forever. And you'll need help carrying things back." He hesitated. She could see the argument behind his eyes, storms of reasons why she shouldn't be seen, weighed against the simple fact that she was right. Finally, he nodded once. "Fine, but stay close." Eliza swallowed the knot in her throat. Staying close wouldn't be hard. Walking into a town full of eyes, that was the hard part. Dusty Ford shimmered in the thin autumn heat as they rode in a handful of buildings, split by a single rutted road. The blacksmith's hammer rang like a heartbeat. The saloon's open door let a faint piano tune drift into the street, the notes wobbly and half-hearted. 2 horses stood tied outside the little meeting house, where someone swept fallen leaves from the steps. Soldiers from the nearby fort lounged by the water trough, caps tilted back, watching the world with lazy interest. Eliza kept her head down, hands tight on the reins. Cole dismounted first. "General Store's this way," he said, tipping his chin toward a long wooden building with a porch full of barrels and rope coils. She followed him up the steps, and the murmurs started, even before her boots reached the porch. "Who's that with Cole Ramsey? New hire." "No." "Look at her dress. Too fine for a ranch girl. Not fine enough for a lady." A woman near the horse trough squinted. "Looks like she's been on the road." Or running from something. Eliza's heart pounded painfully, but she kept her eyes forward. Inside, the general store smelled of coffee beans, leather, and oiled wood. Mr. Pike, a tall man with spectacles forever sliding down his nose, greeted Cole with a nod. "Morning. What can I get you today? Flour, coffee, lamp oil, the usual." They moved down the aisle, but the murmuring followed them soft, sharp, slicing. "That's her. I know it. Where's she from? Heard she's a soiled dove. Maybe Santa Fe, maybe Dodge. Pretty enough to get herself into trouble. That much is clear." Eliza felt her chest tighten. Old shame rose like a tide. Then a new voice cut through the whispers. Higher, sharper. "Well, I'll be Mrs. Agnes Crowell, owner of the boarding house." A woman built like a wagon barrel with eyes like rifle scopes stood near the counter, hand frozen, halfway to a jar of penny candy. I've seen that face before. Eliza knew that tone. Recognition loaded with judgment. Mrs. Crowell stepped closer, slowly, as if savoring the moment, her nose wrinkled, mouth pursing as she studied Eliza like she was a stain on good linen. "Oh yes," she breathed. "I remember now." Eliza's stomach dropped. The other women leaned in. Even Mr. Pike pretended to adjust a shelf so he could listen better. A church lady near the spice bins whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Told you she was trouble." Mrs. Crowell lifted one stubby finger, waggling it in triumph. "You're Eliza Kane." The general store went silent. Even the piano from the saloon seemed to pause. Eliza's breath caught. Her fingers tightened around the sack of flour she'd been holding. "Mrs. Crowell smiled, sweet as spoiled milk. "You're the one who ran out on Mr. Nathan Branson in Santa Fe. Left him standing at the church like a fool. A collective gasp rippled through the store. Poor man, someone sighed. He's well respected, another murmured. Why would she leave him? Well, Mrs. Crowell replied, leaning close like she shared a secret with the whole room. We all know why. Laughter dry. Knowing broke out in small, cruel bursts. Eliza froze where she stood. Heat flushed her cheeks, then drained away so quickly she felt cold. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself not to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Cole hadn't said a word. She risked a glance at him, just enough to see his jaw set hard, eyes narrowed, unreadable, not angry at her, not quite at them, something darker, something weighing. He stepped closer to her, so close she could feel the heat of him through the dust and humiliation settling on her skin. But he didn't speak. Not yet. Mr. Pike cleared his throat. I'll get your coffee. Cole. No one else moved. No one else breathed. Eliza felt the weight of her own name crushing her shoulders, turning her bones to sand. She bowed her head, wishing she could shrink into the floorboards. There were 1,000 things she wanted to say. 1,000 truths. But lies traveled faster, and truth rarely caught up. She stood silent, small beneath the judgment of people who didn't know her at all. And Cole Ramsey watched her carefully. Quietly, his thoughts hidden behind the brim of his hat. Night settled over the Ramsey ranch like a heavy coat, thick and cold around the edges. The ride back from Dusty Ford had been a quiet one. Too quiet. Cole didn't ask questions. Eliza didn't offer answers. The girls had fallen asleep as soon as supper touched their stomachs. Worn out from the day, now the only sounds were wind scraping the shutters and the old stove ticking as it cooled. Eliza stood at the table, hands trembling as she folded the last of the linens. She could feel Cole watching her from the doorway, not with anger, not even suspicion. Something else. Something heavier. Come outside, he said. She followed him to the porch. The night air cut through her borrowed shawl. Coyotes howled somewhere far off, their voices thin against the wide dark. Cole leaned one shoulder against the porch post, arms crossed, hat pushed back just enough for her to see the tight line of his jaw. Eliza, he started, voice low but firm. I need to ask you something straight. She braced herself. In town today. What that woman said. He paused, choosing each word. Is it true? You ran from a man with money and standing? Eliza's breath snagged. Her fingers closed hard around the edge of the shawl. She wanted to lie. She wanted to say none of it mattered. She wanted to say she'd caused no trouble, that she'd been nothing but a foolish girl with cold feet. But she was tired of lies, tired of running from them. Her voice came thin, frayed. Yes. And no. Cole didn't move, didn't blink, just waited with the quiet patience of a man who'd spent his life listening more than speaking. Eliza swallowed painfully. I was a companion in a respectable household in Santa Fe. I read to the lady of the house, helped with small tasks. It was honest work. Her hands shook harder now. Their son, Nathan Branson. She said the name like it tasted bad. Took an interest. Cole's eyes narrowed, but he stayed silent. He cornered me one evening, tried to force himself on me. I fought him, scratched him, got away. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest. I thought it was over. I thought I was safe. Wind rattled the porch railing. She flinched. But the next morning, she continued, voice cracking. He spread stories that I'd been paid before, that I'd trapped him, that I'd begged him for attention. Shame crept into her face, though none of it was hers to carry. Cole's jaw tightened until the muscles twitched. To protect the family name, they arranged a quiet wedding, her voice hollowed at the memory. They told me it was the only way. Marry him and keep quiet, or be ruined. Cole's eyes softened barely, but enough for her to feel it. I tried to convince myself I could do it, she whispered, that maybe he'd treat me better once I belonged to him. But the night before the wedding, I overheard him, at the saloon, laughing with his friends. She hesitated, breath shaking. He said he was buying himself a wife with a dirty past, her throat closed, easy to control, easy to keep in line. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the wind and the faint cry of nightbirds. I left a note, Eliza said, for his mother, not him. I told her I was sorry, but I couldn't be part of what he wanted. She swallowed. Then I ran, with nothing but the dress. She lifted her eyes slowly. I know what you must think. Cole pushed off the porch post, stepping closer just enough for his shadow to meet hers. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, those steady, storm-worn eyes, held something gentle beneath the surface. What I think, he said quietly, is that you survived something no woman should have to. Eliza looked down fast, ashamed of the tears she felt burning at the corners of her eyes. He went on, voice low but firm. I don't care where you've been, only who you are under my roof. Her breath hitched, but the townfolk talk. He shrugged lightly. Doesn't mean they know a damn thing. He held her gaze now, steady and unflinching. You've been honest. That's enough for me. The wind died for a heartbeat, leaving the world strangely still. You can stay, Cole said softly. If you still want to. Eliza's legs nearly gave way. No one had spoken to her like that in months, maybe years. She pressed a hand to her mouth, but no sound came, only tears. Silent, shaking tears she tried desperately to hide. Cole pretended not to notice. He looked out over the yard instead, giving her space to break without shame. Finally, she managed to whisper, "Thank you." He tipped his head once, gentle. We'll take it one day at a time. When Cole walked back inside to check the stove, Eliza stayed on the porch a moment longer. Her breath fogged in the cold. Her hands trembled. But something warm, fragile, unfamiliar began to unfurl in her chest. Not safety. Not yet. But the first real trust anyone had given her in a very long time, and it felt like the smallest, quietest kind of miracle. Winter had begun its slow crawl across the New Mexico territory, seeping into the ranch from every crack it could find. Mornings came white with frost, nights stretched long and sharp, full of coyote calls and cold stars. Eliza wrapped her shawl tighter each evening, feeling the shift in the air, the way a bird feels the coming of snow. One such night, moon buried behind low clouds. Wind moaning across the chimney, a pounding struck the front door hard enough to rattle the frame. Cole reached it first. When he opened the door, a rider leaned heavily in the saddle, breath steaming in the cold, horse sides heaving. Cole, the man gasped. It's Sarah Mathers. Baby's coming wrong. Doc's over at the fort, won't be back till morning. Maybe later. Cole didn't hesitate. I'll saddle up. He threw on his coat, grabbed his hat, and strode toward the barn. Eliza stood in the doorway, knuckles pale against the wood. Maddie rubbed her eyes sleepily from behind her. Ruth, wide awake and watchful. Cole looped the reins over his arm. I'll be back when I can. I'm coming, Eliza said. Cole paused mid-stride. No. I'm coming, she repeated, quieter but firmer. I've seen this before. Something in her voice stilled him. Not fear, not panic. something steady beneath the tremble. He held her gaze for one long second, then nodded. All right, let's go. Sarah Mathers lived in a small cabin near Dusty Ford, tucked against a grove of stunted cottonwoods. Lanterns glowed in the windows, flickering wild shadows. Women crowded the doorway, neighbors, cousins, a few town ladies. Their faces were pinched with worry, their skirts dusted with the night's cold. Inside, the air was thick with heat and the harsh, broken breaths of a woman in agony. Sarah lay on the bed, hair plastered to her temples, sweat streaking down her face. Her husband hovered uselessly near the stove until one of the older women shoved him out the door. As soon as Eliza stepped inside, heads turned. "That's her," someone whispered. "The runaway bride. What does she think she's doing here?" Eliza felt the sting of their eyes, but Sarah's sobs drowned out everything else. She stepped forward. "What's happening?" Cole asked the nearest woman. "Feet first," the woman said. "Baby's turned wrong. We're losing her strength. Losing the baby, too." Eliza inhaled sharply. A memory flared hot, painful, of a cramped tenement room in Santa Fe, a Mexican midwife named Marisol, guiding her shaking hands. "Listen with your palms," Marisol had said, "and don't show fear. Fear steals the mother's breath." Sarah cried out again, the sound scraping along the walls. Eliza moved. "Boil water," she said, pulling off her shawl, strip-clean sheets. She pointed at the nearest woman, hold her hands. "And you keep that fire bright." The women hesitated, exchanging glances. Cole stepped forward. "Do what she says." That broke the tension. Buckets moved. Sheets tore. A kettle screamed to life over the fire. Eliza knelt beside Sarah, laying a gentle hand on her leg. "Sarah, look at me. I'm Eliza. I'm here to help you." Sarah gasped, eyes wild with pain. I can't. It hurts too much." "I know," Eliza whispered. "But you're not alone." She rolled up her sleeves. Her hands were shaking just a little, but she steadied them, breathed through her fear. Memories surged again. Marisol humming softly, a woman praying in Spanish, the smell of smoke and rosemary, a tiny life turning beneath her hands. "Easy," Eliza murmured. "Let me see." Minutes stretched like hours. Sweat beaded on her brow. Sarah writhed, the bed creaking under her. Eliza guided her breathing. "You're doing fine. Just keep your eyes on me." The baby was stuck. Turned wrong. "Slow. Dangerous." "Eliza," one woman whispered. "It's too late." "No," Eliza snapped, sharper than she meant. "Not yet." She slid her hands carefully, palms open, feeling for the small, fragile body. Her heart hammered, but her mind rang clear, the way Marisol had taught her. "Come on, little one," she whispered. "Come on now." Sarah screamed, long, raw, then collapsed against the pillows. "Push," Eliza urged. "Push now." And at last, with one final heave of Sarah's strength, the baby came. Small, limp, too quiet. The room stilled. Even the fire seemed to hush. One woman covered her mouth. Another bowed her head. Eliza felt the weight of the tiny body in her hands, so warm, so still. No cry, not even a flutter of breath. "No," she breathed. "No, no, not yet." She placed the baby on a folded towel and rubbed its small chest with her fingers. Careful, but insistent. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured. "You fought too hard to stop now." She cupped her hands along its back, near the lungs, rubbing gently, willing the tiny chest to rise. Minutes passed, too many, too slow. Sarah sobbed weakly. "Please, please." Eliza bent over the infant, voice shaking but steadying with each word. Breathe, little one, just breathe. Then just as despair pooled heavy in the room, the baby jerked. A thin, wavering cry broke from its lungs, soft, fragile, but alive. Sarah broke into sobs. Women gasped, hands flying to their hearts. Even Cole, standing stiff in the corner, let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The tiny cry rose again stronger now, insistent, demanding the world acknowledge it. Eliza let out a shaky exhale, relief flooding her bones. She placed the baby into Sarah's trembling arms. The mother cradled her child as though the whole world had been given back to her. Around them, the women stared at Eliza with a mix of awe and something new, respect, maybe even gratitude. And Eliza felt their eyes differently, this time not as knives, but as witnesses to a truth she'd kept hidden for too long. Cole stepped to her side. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. But the look he gave her, quiet, steady, warm as firelight, said everything she hadn't dared hope someone might see. Outside, winter wind pushed against the cabin walls, but inside, a small miracle breathed its first breaths. And Eliza, hands still trembling, stood in the center of it all. Unsure what to do with the sudden brightness swelling in her chest. For a few days after the night at Sarah Mathers's cabin, Dusty Ford hummed like a beehive. Folks who'd barely spoken to Eliza before now nodded at her on the street. Women she didn't know stopped her to say thank you. Even the blacksmith, a man of few words and fewer smiles, gave her a respectful tilt of his chin as she passed. Stories traveled fast in a small town. Good stories, faster still. But bad stories, bad ones, ran like wildfire, carried by the same wind. By the end of the week, whispers had slithered into the saloon, across the general store porch, down to the fort's mess hall. Ask the Ramsey place about that woman, one soldier said. Saved a mother and baby by herself. She's got a past, though. Someone else added, pretty ones always do. And in the way of frontier truth, tales blurred, stretched, twisted, a miracle worker, a runaway wife, a heartbreaker, a whore with a silver tongue, an angel in boots. It all depended on who was telling it. Dusty Ford buzzed louder each day, until the moment the buzzing stopped. Stopped cold. It happened late one morning. A well-dressed rider came trotting into town, coat brushed clean, boots polished, hat brim sharp enough to cut wind. Men paused mid-conversation. Women straightened their backs. Even the old hound, sleeping outside Pike's store, lifted its head. Behind the stranger rode a deputy from the fort, wearing the khaki coat and stiff posture that said he'd rather be anywhere else. The two horses halted outside the saloon. The rider swung down, dusting off gloves that didn't need dusting. His smile was bright, sharp, and practiced. He ordered a round for the house before he'd even taken a seat. Nathan Branson had arrived. Inside. The saloon quieted as he lifted his glass. "Gentlemen," Branson said, his voice warm enough to fool the unwise. A toast to chasing down lost things and setting them right. Men clinked glasses, out of habit, more than trust. Someone asked what he was looking for. Branson sighed. A perfect imitation of a man wronged. A woman, he said. My fiancée. Poor thing. She's not well. He shook his head as if pitying the heavens. Eliza Kane. Seduced me? Yes. I'll say the word, then took advantage of my family's generosity and ran, took valuables, left chaos. I'm just here to bring her home, kindly, quietly. A murmur rippled, recognition mixed with scandal. A gambler leaned forward. Heard she saved a baby's life last week. Branson's smile flattened. She has many talents, but stability isn't one of them. The deputy shifted uncomfortably. Branson noticed. He placed a hand on the man's shoulder like they were old friends. I'm not pressing charges yet, hoping she'll come willingly. She belongs with me. No one challenged him. No one dared. The story spread like spilled oil. Word reached the ranch by sundown. Cole was repairing a fence post when a ranch boy from town galloped up, breathless. Mr. Ramsey, there's a gentleman down in Dusty Ford asking about your housekeeper. Says he's from Santa Fe. Cole didn't move at first. The hammer hung in his hand. Dust settled in his throat like ash. Describe him, he said finally. Well-dressed? Smooth talker? Says she ran off from him. Cole's gut tightened until it felt like someone had cinched a rope around it. Tell your pa. I said thanks, Cole said, voice flat. The boy nodded and rode off. Cole stared toward the west ridge, where the sky glowed the last sickle of evening light. He didn't like the feeling crawling up his spine. It made him feel too protective, too aware, too afraid. He didn't tell Eliza. Not yet. Not until he knew what he was dealing with. They didn't have to wait long. Just after dinner, lanterns lit, girls playing quietly by the stove. The crunch of hooves sounded outside. Slow, deliberate. Cole stood before anyone could knock. When he opened the door, the world narrowed to two figures, silhouetted by the fading light. The fort deputy, hat in hand, and Nathan Branson, smiling like a man walking into his own parlor. Evening, Branson said pleasantly. Mr. Ramsey? I presume Cole leaned one forearm on the doorframe. That's right. Good. Saves us a ride. Branson tipped his hat with unnecessary flourish. I'm here for Miss Eliza Kane, my fiancée. Cole didn't blink. She ain't said anything about being engaged. Branson tutted softly. Well, she ran before we could make it official. Head full of foolish notions. But her things are still with my family. Her obligations, too. The deputy cleared his throat. We're just here to talk. Branson smiled wider. Of course, no need for trouble. Though, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. Certain contracts were breached, and valuables went missing. I'd hate to involve territorial law unless I must. Cole's jaw clamped hard. She stole nothing. Branson arched a brow. Interesting that you'd know. He swept past Cole without waiting for permission, stepping into the lamplight of the house. Eliza, folding laundry, looked up and froze. Branson's smile sharpened like a blade, finding its target. There you are, my dear. He spread his arms as if greeting a prodigal bride. Surely you're ready to come home now. You don't belong in a place like this. The room went terribly still. Ruth's eyes widened. Maddie clutched her doll. Eliza's breath hitched, her skin draining of color, and Cole stepped between them before he even realized he'd moved. The storm had arrived, but the real lightning hadn't struck yet. When Nathan Branson finally rode away, deputy trailing behind him like a reluctant shadow, the Ramsey ranch fell into a silence so tight it pressed against the ribs. The girls didn't speak. Even the wind outside seemed to hush itself, as if the whole land were listening for what might happen next. Inside, the house felt smaller, walls closer, air heavier. Cole paced from the porch to the stove, to the window and back again, boots biting into the floorboards. Every step echoed the same question, beating against his skull. What have you brought into this house? But deeper still, another question whispered, what will happen if she leaves? He rubbed a hand over his face, breathing hard. Nathan Branson wasn't bluffing. Men like him never bluffed. He had money, status, influence in Santa Fe. If he wanted, he could drag this thing before a judge, claim stolen goods, claim breach of contract, make Cole look like a man harboring a fugitive woman of questionable virtue. The army might get involved. The judge might believe Branson's polished lies. Cole could lose the ranch, his land, his livelihood, even, God forbid, his girls. If someone insinuated he kept a fallen woman under his roof. Every path forward felt like a trap. Behind him, Eliza stood perfectly still, arms wrapped around herself, like she was trying to keep her bones from shaking apart. She finally spoke, so soft, he almost didn't hear. "I'll go." Cole stopped pacing. "Eliza, I won't have your girls lose their home because of me." Her voice was steadier now, though her face had gone pale. "It's my mess, not yours." Across the room, Maddie's eyes filled instantly. "No." She ran to Eliza, clinging to her skirts with desperate little hands. "Don't go, don't go." Eliza knelt, brushing Maddie's hair back with trembling fingers. "Sweetheart, sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices." "No," Maddie cried harder. "Stay." Ruth stood near the doorway, stiff as carved wood, eyes dark and hollow. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence cut sharper than shouting. Eliza looked at the girls with a kind of quiet heartbreak, then rose and went to the small back room. She began packing her few things, folding them carefully, as if being tidy might make the leaving hurt less. Cole turned away, jaw clenched so tight it shook. Night dropped over the ranch like a heavy tarp. No stars, no moon, just thick, dark. Maddie cried, until she fell asleep in Ruth's lap. Ruth stroked her hair without blinking, face calm in the way of someone clinging to the last thread of control. Cole found Eliza in the kitchen, folding the last of her things into a faded satchel. She didn't look up. "Eliza," Cole said, his voice too strained. "Listen, I understand," she murmured. "You don't have to explain." He swallowed hard. Maybe it's safer if you go with Branson, for now, just until things blow over." The words tasted like ash, wrong, weak, but fear had him by the throat, and fear made a man say things he didn't believe in daylight. Eliza went still, not a breath, not a blink, just still. After a long moment, she nodded once. "If that's what you think best." Cole closed his eyes. The quiet broke something inside him. He didn't notice the soft steps behind them until a voice, sharp and shaking, sliced through the air. "You promised we were a family now." Cole spun around. Ruth stood in the doorway, her braids messy, her nightdress wrinkled, her fists trembling at her sides. But her voice carried the fire of someone twice her size. "Families don't send each other back to the people who hurt them," she cried. "You said we were safe. You said people who did wrong to Mama would never get near us again." So why her voice cracked? Why would you make her go with that man? Cole opened his mouth, but no words came. Ruth stepped forward, tears gathering but refusing to fall. She pointed at Eliza, small hand shaking like a leaf. "She saved our house. She saved Maddie. She saved Sarah Mathers's baby." Ruth's voice broke. She came when nobody else would. Eliza's breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth. Ruth's chin trembled, but she held her ground. "She belongs here." The words landed heavy on Cole's chest, on Eliza's heart, on the very walls of the house. Cole felt something slam through him, knocking the breath out of his lungs. He had seen Ruth cry before. He had seen her scared. He had seen her angry. But he had never seen her speak like she was fighting for her own soul. And in that moment, He finally understood Eliza wasn't just the woman he'd found in the dust. She wasn't just the housekeeper, just a stray, just a problem dropped on his doorstep. She had become part of his girls, part of his home, part of him, and sending her away would break something in all of them. He stared at Ruth, heart pounding, realizing the truth too late to hide from it. He was terrified, terrified of losing Eliza, terrified of wanting her, terrified of the storm Branson brought, Branson. Terrified of what choosing her might cost, but most of all he was terrified of watching her disappear through his door and never come back. Outside, the wind scraped the shutters like claws. Inside, Cole Ramsey stood frozen, his daughter's words echoing through the house. Families don't send each other back to the people who hurt them. And Eliza, holding her small satchel, could only stare at them, both caught between hope and heartbreak. The night trembled with the weight of the choice he had yet to make. Word spread fast through Dusty Ford, riding on gossip tongues and boot heels. Branson wanted a hearing. Not a court, not officially, just a polite gathering where he could present his case. That was how men like him operated. Coat brushed, boots polished, voice smooth as butter, smiled in public, poisoned in private. The place chosen was the livery stable behind Pike's store, a long wooden shed that smelled of hay and mule sweat. Lanterns hung from hooks, swinging whenever the wind sneaked through the cracks. Mules stamped restlessly in their stalls. Men from the saloon filtered in, hats low. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Soldiers from the fort stood near the door, uneasy but ready. Cole arrived with Eliza at his side. Her steps were small, controlled, the way someone walked toward a gallows without wanting to show fear. She clutched her shawl so tightly her knuckles had gone bloodless. Ruth and Maddie wanted to come, but Cole had insisted they stay with Sarah Mathers. This gathering wasn't for children. As Cole and Eliza stepped inside, the crowd parted around them with the low rustle of judgment. Branson stood at the front, bright as a brass button, coat immaculate, despite the hay on the floor. "Ah," he said warmly, "there you are. Thank you for coming. I simply want clarity for all involved." A few people nodded. Respectable tone, respectable clothes, respectable lies. Cole's jaw locked. Branson raised his hands, palms outward, as if blessingly guiding the proceedings. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I come not with accusation, but compassion." He glanced at Eliza, his voice thick with false regret. "My poor fiancée here confused, troubled, has been led astray. I only want to bring her home." Murmurs rippled. Eliza's breath hitched. Branson continued, painting himself as wronged and noble. "She seduced me, misled my family, took my mother's jewelry and $200 we'd set aside for the wedding." He sighed heavily, then ran. A woman near the front tisked, shaking her head. Another whispered, "Such a shame." And she seemed so sweet. Eliza tried to speak, voice trembling, but brave. "That isn't what happened." Branson lifted a hand in her direction. "Please, Eliza, let's not embarrass ourselves further." The murmurs grew louder. Her words drowned before they even rose. Cole stepped forward. In the old general store weeks ago, he'd stood silent, unsure, afraid to stir trouble. Not today. His voice dropped into the room like a hammer. "That's enough." The murmuring stopped. Cole placed himself squarely beside Eliza, shoulders broad, eyes cold. "Eliza told me what happened," he said, "and I believe her." Branson's smile curved thin, mocking. "Well, how noble." Cole didn't flinch. "If you call her a liar, You call me one, too. The livery stable went dead still. Even the mules stopped moving. For a moment, it felt like the whole town held its breath. Branson's expression twitched, just a flicker, but enough for Cole to see it. The polished veneer, slipping. "Mr. Ramsey," Branson said, voice tightening, "you're a decent man. Don't ruin yourself defending a voice from the back cut him off. I got something to say." Heads turned. A man stepped forward, thin, dark-haired, shoulders stooped from years of work. Miguel Ortiz. A stable hand from the fort now, but once he'd worked in Santa Fe, Cole recognized him. Hard worker, quiet, always polite. Branson's face paled just slightly. Miguel removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "I know this man." He nodded at Branson. "Worked near his family's place. Saw more than I should have." Branson stiffened. "You don't know what you're saying?" Miguel ignored him. "I saw you drag that servant girl behind the barn." His voice was soft, but it carried. Heard her crying, then saw her fired the next morning. No wages, no explanation. Gasps rippled across the stable. Miguel's eyes moved to Eliza. "And I saw you too. Miss?" "Leaving at first light one morning, dress torn, no bag, no jewelry, nothing in your hands but a folded note." Eliza's breath caught. She hadn't known anyone saw. Miguel looked back at Branson. "You lied about her. Same way you lied about that other girl." Branson's face cracked like thin ice. "That's slander," he snapped. "No, sir," Miguel said quietly. "Just truth." The fort deputy, who had lingered near the doorway, straightened. He'd heard every word, every lie, every crack in Branson's story. He touched Branson's arm, official enough to matter. "Mr. Branson," he said slowly, "I think we need to step outside. Have ourselves a proper talk." Branson jerked away from him. "You take her side over mine. I'm a Branson, for God's sake. Exactly why we need to talk." The deputy's voice remained calm, but firm. Gasps and low murmurs swelled like a wave inside the stable. Branson looked around wildly, searching for support. But polished lies had finally dulled, and townsfolk weren't as blind as he'd hoped. His mask slipped completely, revealing the brittle, bitter man beneath, his eyes fixed on Eliza cold, furious. "This isn't over," he hissed. Cole stepped between them, a half-second later, hand hovering near his holster, not drawing, just promising. "It is here," Cole said quietly. Eliza stared at the floor, breath shuddering through her. She'd expected humiliation. She'd expected defeat. She'd never expected someone to speak for her, not like this. Miguel lowered his hat, backing away with humble dignity. And Branson, cornered for the first time in his life, followed the deputy out into the night, his boots echoing with the sound of a man realizing he had lost control. Inside the stable, no one moved, no one spoke, until Ruth, who had slipped in behind them without Cole noticing, whispered shakily, "Pa, does this mean she can stay?" Cole couldn't answer. Not yet. Not with his heart hammering in his throat. Eliza turned her face away, unable to hide the trembling hope and fear cracking her chest wide open. The lanterns swung softly overhead, tossing shadows across all their faces. The truth had finally found daylight, but daylight, as always, brought its own kind of danger. Branson didn't go quietly, but he went. By noon the next day, the fort deputy had made things clear, without proof of theft, and with Miguel's testimony placing the blame squarely on Branson's shoulders. There would be no forced removal, no warrant, no claim of property or contract, no grounds to drag Eliza anywhere she didn't choose to go. Branson sputtered, paced, threatened to bring his family's lawyers across half the territory. But the deputy only folded his arms, unimpressed. "Mr. Branson," he said, "you press this any further, and the law's going to start looking more at you than at her." That did it. Branson mounted up, seething, and threw one last venomous look toward the dusty street of Dusty Ford. "This isn't the end," he spat. "I'll see her ruined." But even fury has edges, and he could feel eyes on him. Soldiers, townsfolk, God himself maybe, and he knew better than to push today. He rode out alone, the sound of his horse's hooves fading like a threat tossed into the wind. Back at the ranch, the tension unwound, slow and shaky. Eliza barely got her boots off before Maddie barreled into her, wrapping both arms around her waist and clinging like she might disappear if Maddie let go. Ruth stood stiff a moment longer, then stepped in and wrapped her too, face buried in Eliza's shoulder. Eliza held them both, trembling from relief she hadn't yet learned how to breathe through. Cole stood a few steps away, watching his girls cling to the woman who'd somehow stitched their lives back together without meaning to. His chest ached with something he couldn't name, something swelling and unfamiliar, something that felt like belonging, like choice, like home. Days passed. Winter softened around the edges, letting pockets of warm air drift in with the sunlight. The ranch settled back into its usual rhythm chores, feeding animals, tending fences, but something had shifted. Eliza smiled more. Ruth watched less suspiciously. Maddie hummed louder. And Cole? Cole found himself looking for Eliza in ways he hadn't before, listening for her footsteps, noting when she hummed to herself, catching the way she tucked hair behind her ear when she was nervous. He tried not to stare, tried and failed. One evening, with the sun dropping behind the hills and painting the sky in soft rose and gold, Cole found her standing by the corral, elbows resting on the top rail. The horses grazed quietly. Dust glowed in the amber light. The world felt still. He walked up beside her, hat in his hands, clearing his throat as if preparing for a battle. "Eliza," he said. She turned slowly. Yes, Cole swallowed. "When you came here, it was just supposed to be a roof and a warm meal. You'd work. I'd pay. That was all." A breeze brushed between them. Eliza lowered her gaze, waiting, but somewhere between burnt biscuits, a faint smile tugged at his mouth. "And saving babies." He exhaled, shakily. "And standing up to half this territory." It stopped being just that. Eliza's fingers tightened on the rail. Cole looked out toward the far pasture, as if the words might come easier if he didn't look directly at her. "Truth is, I need help with the girls. Real help. They need someone patient, someone gentle, someone they already—" He cleared his throat again. "Care for." A long pause stretched between them. "But it's more than that," he added quietly. "More than chores. More than keeping the house together." He turned toward her then, fully, hat held against his chest like a shield. His voice lowered, slow and steady the way a man speaks when he refuses to rush something sacred. "I want you to have a name. Folks can't twist again. I want you to have protection, mine. I want you to stay because this place feels wrong without you." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, one slow footfall at a time. "I need a mother for my girls," he said softly. "And you need shelter." He let a long silence settle, warm and heavy. "But the truth is, I need you, Eliza." Her eyes burned. His voice stayed steady. "Will you marry me?" The world stopped. Horses grazed in quiet rhythm. The sun dipped lower, turning the corral rails to gold. A bird called once, then fell silent. Eliza's voice trembled. Cole, I won't be traded like stock. Not again. Not ever. I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't survive being someone's obligation. Cole's face softened in a way she'd never seen before, not as a father, not as a rancher, but as a man laying down every weapon he had. You're not an obligation, he said, and you choose this. Or you don't. I won't push. I won't press. You want to walk away tomorrow. You walk. You stay because you decide to. Not because of me. Not because of them. Because it's your life. Eliza's breath hitched hard. Slowly, like a leaf drifting toward earth, she reached out and touched the edge of his hand. Her voice came like a whisper, scraped raw. Yes. Cole's chest rose sharp, as if he'd been underwater all this time. She added, barely audible, but not because I need saving. She lifted her tear-wet eyes to his. Because this, the girls, it feels like home. The last light of the day slipped over them like a quiet blessing. Cole closed his eyes, overcame for a moment, then rested his forehead gently against hers. No grand gesture, no fireworks. Just the soft, steady certainty of two people choosing each other after weathering storms on separate paths. Behind them, a horse snorted softly, as if approving, somewhere in the house. Ruth peeked out the window, smile blooming. Maddie pressed her face against the glass, whispering, she's staying. She's really staying. And out by the corral, under the fading sky. Eliza Kane let herself believe, maybe for the first time, that not all proposals were cages. Some were doors, and this one led home. Late spring brought a gentler kind of light to the Ramsey Ranch, soft gold in the mornings, warm amber in the evenings. Snowmelt trickled through the gullies, young grass pushed up green and stubborn between the rocks. Even the wind seemed friendlier, carrying the scent of sage and warm earth instead of winter's bite. The ranch itself looked different. Fences stood mended, boards planed clean and straight under Cole's steady hand. The porch rail had been sanded smooth. A small garden grew behind the house herbs, onions, a scatter of wildflowers Eliza had coaxed from seeds gathered on the trail. Maddie watered them each afternoon, splashing half the bucket onto her boots. Ruth weeded in silence, but with a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there months ago. Everything felt tended now, even the air. Their wedding was simple, almost plain, just the way both of them needed it to be. It took place in the town meeting house, where sun filtered through dusty windows and the benches smelled of old pine. Eliza wore clean calico, nothing more. Cole wore his best shirt, still a little frayed at the cuffs. Ruth and Maddie stood proudly on either side of him, the younger gripping flowers she'd picked from the roadside. Some townsfolk came out of politeness, some out of genuine affection. A few still watched with thin mouths and tight shoulders, but even they kept their peace. Pastor Whitlow said the vows quickly, with more warmth than ceremony. Cole spoke his part, steady as a fence post, but when Eliza said hers, his breath caught just a little. When it was done, Maddie grabbed Eliza's hand and whispered loudly, "You're ours now, for real." Ruth didn't say anything, but she slipped her hand around Eliza's waist and held tight the entire wagon ride home. No fuss, no feast, just belonging. By midsummer, folks had stopped whispering when they saw Eliza in town. Some even sought her out quietly, respectfully, when trouble struck their homes. So it was no surprise when a neighbor rode hard across the prairie one warm afternoon, shouting breathlessly that Mrs. Barton was having her baby early, and it weren't coming right. Cole barely had time to saddle a horse before Eliza was already tying back her hair and gathering linens. When they reached the Barton cabin, a circle of anxious women parted instinctively for her. No suspicion this time, no sideways looks, only trust the kind earned through fire and pain and steady hands. Eliza took charge with calm authority. Boil water, tear clean sheets, keep her warm, and keep that fire lit. This time, no one questioned her. They moved as she moved, listened as she spoke. She showed them tricks Marisol had once shown her: how to ease a mother's breathing, how to turn a baby's shoulders gently, how to listen with your palms. Hours passed in the dim, warm cabin. Sweat, tears, soft prayers. And finally, a cry. Thin at first, then loud and strong. Outside, Cole had paced a groove into the dirt. The moment he heard that cry, he stopped, shoulders sagging with relief. The other men clapped him on the back, offering congratulations. He didn't know what to do with. When Eliza stepped out, exhausted but glowing faintly, Cole met her with a quiet smile that said more than words ever could. "You did it again?" he murmured. Eliza shook her head. "She did it. I only helped her believe she could." Cole looked at her with something soft and unguarded, something almost like awe. "You help a lot, more than you know." Eliza felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't look away. The night settled calm and sweet when they returned to the ranch. Dinner dishes were washed. The last of the light clung to the hills like a soft blanket. The four of them sat on the porch steps. Cole, Eliza, Ruth, Maddie, all warm from the day's work. Down in the small pen, a newborn calf wobbled around its mother, still uncertain on its legs. "I say we name her Hope," Maddie declared, hugging her knees. Ruth snorted. "Hope is too soft. She looks like a miracle." "No, she doesn't." "Yes, she does." "Does not." Eliza's quiet laugh slipped into the evening air, warm as honey. Cole stretched an arm behind her, not quite touching, simply sharing the space between them. "Calf doesn't care what she's called," he said, "long as she's fed." Maddie leaned into Eliza's side, sighing contentedly. Ruth pretended not to notice, but edged closer too. And then, like it was the easiest thing in the world, Maddie whispered, "Ma, tell us the story about the storm again, how you got lost and Pa found you." Eliza froze. The word hung in the air, soft, innocent, heavier than any stone she had ever carried. "Ma." Ruth didn't correct her. Cole didn't speak. The wind didn't move. Eliza swallowed, eyes stinging. She rested a hand on Maddie's hair, fingers trembling. "Well," she began softly, voice catching. The wind was howling that night. Ruth leaned against her arm. Maddie snuggled closer. Cole exhaled long and slow, a man finally at peace. The story unfolded gently from Eliza's lips, each word a thread woven into the fabric of a family that had taken time, scars, and courage to create. And as her voice drifted across the porch and out into the wide western sky, the ranch glowed under the last brushstroke of daylight, a place not built on chance, not built on fear, not built on running, but on choosing each other, day after day. A home, at last. Sometimes. Healing begins where we least expect it, on a quiet porch, in a stranger's kindness, or in the simple courage of choosing to stay. Eliza didn't find safety because someone rescued her. She found it because someone finally listened and believed. And Cole didn't mend his family by keeping the world out. He mended it by opening the door to someone who needed a place just as much as they did. Maybe that's the truth buried in their story, that broken people don't ruin a home. Sometimes They're the very ones who teach it how to breathe again. And in the wide silence of the West, where the wind carries more ghosts than words, a family isn't something you're handed. It's something you build slowly, gently, with every small act of trust. If Eliza and Cole remind us of anything, it's that love doesn't always arrive like a blazing sunrise. Sometimes it comes on tired feet, wearing torn cloth, whispering a single plea, "Don't send me back." And when we answer that plea with grace, we discover that home is not a place at all, but the people who stay when the storm comes. Thank you for sitting with us through this journey, for letting the quiet moments, the hard truths, and the small miracles settle in your heart. Stories like this stay alive because of you. Every time you listen, every time you share a kind word or pass a tale along, you help keep compassion alive in a world that moves too fast. Thank you for being here with us. Every like, share, and subscribe helps us tell more stories that touch the soul, more stories of grace, grit, and the quiet courage that shaped the Old West. We'll see you in the next one.